Hi, I'm Simon. I'm 26. I had a stroke when I was 17. I was actually at college in the morning and I decided that I'd just have the afternoon off because I can't remember, we were doing some lesson and I wasn't really too keen on it, if I'm being honest. And at that time in the morning I didn't feel like I was unwell, or I didn't feel, I didn't feel like I couldn't be there, but I decided to go home in the afternoon anyway. And I remember borrowing some money off somebody actually, and I'm sure I remember it today, but I asked for a couple of pounds just to get on the bus to go home. I had the idea that I wanted to go to the gym, so that was the intention. So I got on the bus, didn't feel any different, and I was on the way home. I had my lunch on the bus, and yeah, I was absolutely fine until it got to about 5 minutes until the end when I was going to get off at the bus station, and I stood up. I remember standing up because I wanted to get off, and it was sort of a couple of minutes just before we were going to stop, and obviously everybody was getting up ready to get off. I remember feeling like I felt like I'd just sort of stood up and everything decided to the blood decided to rush to my head, and it sort of felt a little bit weird, a little bit, I don't know, it felt a little bit uncomfortable, I suppose. And we ended up stopping, and I was starting to walk down the bus to the exit at the front, and I felt like my legs, they just felt really weird. They felt like they were going to give way, I think. And I got to the end of the bus, walked through the bus station. I didn't feel particularly great at that time. I didn't have a headache, which was maybe a little bit odd compared to, considering what eventually happened. But I walked through the bus station towards the back of one of the buildings, through a little walkway to behind the Army Careers Office, where I sat down on a wall. Started to feel really, really lightheaded now. I remember breathing quite heavily. I felt as if I was a bit drunk. I felt as if I'd had a couple of drinks. But it seemed to get worse. I remember my breathing started to get really quite heavy. I then started to get a little bit upset because I didn't know what was going on. And I remember sitting there looking at my phone, trying to type in some numbers for somebody to help, because I didn't know. I was trying to call my dad actually, and I couldn't type in the numbers right. I couldn't find his number. So I thought, well, the only thing I can do here, and the logical thing for me to do at the time, was to go to sleep on the floor, which would sound ridiculous now, but I put my bag in front of me. I went to lie down and to put my head on the bag, and I tried to go to sleep, and that's all I really remember initially at that point in time. And then I remember two guys coming behind me to sort of stand next to me either side, and they were trying to talk to me, and I remember vaguely looking up at them and trying to say something, but I couldn't say anything obviously at the time because I had a bleed, I had a brain hemorrhage, that the blood was rushing through my head, and at the time it was difficult for me to make sense of what was going on. I remember them trying to ask me what was wrong with me, but I couldn't say anything. To be fair, nobody really knew. They did say that a couple of people had walked past and weren't sure and didn't stop or anything. I guess I wasn't looking any different from any normal college day. I wasn't scruffy. I looked relatively smart, and I don't know, I guess people sometimes don't want to stop and try to find out what's going on because they don't want to get involved. But in this particular instance, I guess I was in real need and in real help, I suppose. So they tried to make sense of it, didn't really know what was going on. They called an ambulance, and I remember the sound of the ambulance. And I remember vaguely a vague image of seeing it next to me. And luckily, one of the guys that I started working with about a month before it happened actually came past the same way. So they were able to verify who I was to the people that saw me on the CCTV camera at the back of the building, which was remarkably very important in terms of my recovery and the surgery that I, was the surgery that I had. If I hadn't have had it and I wasn't found at that time, then things would have been significantly different. So luckily Nick knew me and told the guys that I wasn't on any particular drugs, or it wasn't normal for me to be, drinking at that time of day or anything. So they were able to say everything was fine.